This is a found-footage horror movie so frightening it could scare even ghosts, and a zombie film more terrifying than Wreck. It's the 2008 film Quarantine, known as the American version of Wreck. The story begins. Angela is the host of a late-night TV program. Tonight, their show is visiting a fire station to interview firefighters on night duty, learning about their nightly routine. Although it's Angela's first time on camera, her outgoing personality quickly helps her get along well with the firefighters. Thinking it would be an ordinary night, a sudden, urgent alarm shatters the calm. Firefighters are preparing to respond to an emergency call. To boost ratings, Angela naturally doesn't miss the opportunity and hops onto the fire truck. On the way, Angela appears exceptionally excited, eagerly anticipating the upcoming coverage. But she could never have imagined that this would turn out to be a hellish journey with no return. Arriving at their destination, they realize the police are already there, immediately sensing the seriousness of the situation. Yuri, the person who called for help, leads them into an old apartment building where frightened residents anxiously gather in the first-floor lobby, obviously shaken by something they just experienced. Then, a policeman comes down to receive them, explaining the situation while leading the group upstairs. It turns out someone heard screams coming from the room of Mrs. Espinosa, an elderly woman living alone on the second floor, and worried she might be in trouble, so they called the police. Soon everyone reaches her door, discovering it locked from the inside and no response to knocking. The firefighters have no choice but to forcibly break in. Inside, Mrs. Espinosa stands completely still, not responding at all to the police officer's questions. As everyone cautiously walks into the room, suddenly a dog runs out from inside. But as they approach Mrs. Espinosa, they realize something is terribly wrong. She's covered in blood and making strange noises. To get clearer footage, Scott turns on the camera lights, but this action unexpectedly triggers Mrs. Espinosa to go berserk. Her face twisted as she lunges violently at one of the officers. Everyone frantically tries to restrain her, but Mrs. Espinosa viciously bites into James's neck. The sudden attack terrifies everyone. Together, they finally subdue Mrs. Espinosa and hastily carry the injured James downstairs to get medical help, leaving firefighter George upstairs to guard Mrs. Espinosa. But they never expected that the main door downstairs would be locked from the outside, and no matter how much they shouted for help, nobody responded. Even the police and firefighters were clueless about the situation. As everyone remains puzzled, a voice announces through a loudspeaker outside, informing them the entire building has been sealed off. Nobody is allowed to leave, and reassuring them it'll soon be over, but providing no explanation. Hearing this, everyone becomes even more panicked, especially as James's injury worsens, putting him in critical danger. But before they can calm down, a loud crashing sound suddenly rings out. Firefighter George falls from upstairs onto the ground. Everyone rushes over and finds him barely alive. What exactly happened upstairs? Immediately, the police and firefighters head back upstairs to investigate again, specifically instructing the others not to follow. But Angela and her cameraman Scott secretly follow anyway, hoping to capture exciting footage. They arrive at Mrs. Espinosa's door, finding no police or firefighters there, but hearing noises inside. Scott decides to take a look, when suddenly a woman rushes out screaming and falls heavily to the ground. Hearing the commotion, the police and firefighters hurry down from above, but the woman has already stopped breathing. At that moment, Mrs. Espinosa appears once again, staring intently at them. From her blood-soaked appearance, it's clear that both the firefighter who fell and the woman lying dead are her victims. The police officer immediately orders her to raise her hands and stay put, but Mrs. Espinosa ignores the command and aggressively charges at them. Left with no choice, the officer shoots and kills Mrs. Espinosa on the spot. But the situation has escalated far beyond anyone's expectations. Angela stands stunned for a long while before recovering. All of this has been clearly captured by the camera. For safety's sake, Jake begins inspecting each floor, asking all residents to gather back in the first-floor lobby. But when they reach an apartment on the fourth floor, they discover another woman behaving strangely, sitting quietly on the sofa staring blankly at a TV screen displaying no image, completely unresponsive to Jake's calls. Jake and Angela have to forcefully take the woman downstairs, failing to notice her abnormal symptoms like foaming at the mouth and severe coughing. Just as they return to the first floor, the veterinarian Lawrence urgently reminds them that the injured person's condition is critical and can't be delayed any longer. So firefighter Jake decides to disregard orders and attempt a secret escape through the back door. But they are shocked to find the back door already sealed by fully armed soldiers. Subsequently, all doors and windows of the apartment building are tightly blocked off. Through loudspeakers, the soldiers announced their suspicion of a biochemical virus incident in the building, declaring that specialized personnel will enter for further investigation and ordering everyone to remain in place. Anyone attempting to escape will face consequences at their own risk. Only now do they fully realize the gravity of the situation. Helpless, they return once again to the lobby, and when someone tries calling for help, they realize the building's phone and internet connections have already been cut off, completely isolating them from the outside world. At this point, all they can do is continue to wait for rescue. While Lawrence treats the police officer's wounds, he expresses disbelief, astonished that an elderly woman could inflict such severe injuries on two grown men. At the same time, Angela begins interviewing the residents on site, collecting basic information about them. However, just as she interviews a middle-aged couple, a sudden scream echoes through the area, making everyone turn around in shock, almost scared out of their minds. Severely injured George is dragging his broken left leg, staggering into the hall with foam around his mouth and a twisted expression, as if completely numb to pain. With Danny and Jake's help, Lawrence quickly injects George with a sedative and sends him back to his room. At this moment, Lawrence also notices something alarming. Whether it's the injured or previous patients, everyone exhibits symptoms like excessive saliva and tear secretion, high fever, speech difficulty, swallowing trouble, and neurological disorders, almost perfectly matching the clinical signs of rabies. But the problem is, normally rabies has an incubation period of at least several months, making it impossible to appear so rapidly. Hence, Lawrence can't confirm it's rabies for sure, only concluding that a highly infectious, rabies-like disease is spreading inside the apartment. Hearing this news, one resident panics. He believes that since a contagious disease is confirmed, people shouldn't remain gathered together. Instead, they should isolate themselves in their rooms to reduce infection risk. Ignoring everyone's objections, Randy insists on taking the elevator upstairs. Bernard and Sadie also plan to go back to their apartment and check the news on TV, hoping to find coverage on the incident. Angela, eager to know what's being reported, decides to follow them upstairs. But just as they reach the second floor, the dog that earlier escaped from Mrs. Espinosa's apartment blocks their path. The dog barks fiercely, highly aggressive, foaming at the mouth, clearly infected and sick. Coincidentally, at that moment, Randy, who had earlier taken the elevator, emerges upstairs. The rabid dog sees him and immediately charges. Randy panics and tries retreating into the elevator to close the door, but the dog knocks him down and violently bites him. Without any tools at hand, others dare not intervene. They can only seize the chaotic moment to flee back into the room, desperately hoping to find news coverage about the ongoing event. Indeed, news of the apartment incident is airing, but the police lie blatantly on camera, falsely claiming everyone inside the building has been safely evacuated. Before anyone can react, the TV screen abruptly blacks out, and the entire room plunges into darkness. It turns out the building's power has been deliberately cut off. At the exact moment darkness falls, an infected person suddenly emerges from the shadows, roaring wildly and lunging toward Angela, her face twisted, her movements crazed. In a critical instant, Scott uses his camera to strike down the attacker, saving Angela from harm. After this harrowing incident, everyone obediently gathers together, not daring to act recklessly again. Danny also brings some good news. Specialists from the CDC will soon enter the building to test everyone, and those with no abnormalities will be safely evacuated. Sure enough, shortly afterward, the door opens and two personnel in protective suits enter. But instead of immediately testing everyone, they head directly into the infected person's room. Scott secretly follows and records the entire process. He sees them first inject George with a sedative, then, using a drill, bore into George's brain, seemingly to extract brain tissue for research. Unexpectedly, George mutates during the procedure, violently attacking and biting one of the staff members. The other three hurriedly fled the room in terror, but Lawrence, who was a step too late, was locked inside by one of the containment personnel. Jake loudly demands the door be opened to save Lawrence, but the staff refuses, claiming Lawrence has been bitten. Inside, Lawrence frantically pounds on the door, desperately pleading his innocence, insisting that he isn't injured. But the inspector remains unmoved. He won't risk opening the door, even if he might be wrong. Ultimately, amid the stalemate, chilling screams echo from inside as Lawrence tragically meets his end, confirming the building is no longer safe. Seeing that the door is about to be broken through, the others have no choice but to flee back to the lobby once again. Fortunately, a rolling shutter door still manages to temporarily hold off the infected. But the inspector's cold-blooded actions completely ignite everyone's fury. Under intense questioning, he reluctantly reveals the truth. Just yesterday, the CDC received a call from a veterinary clinic about a sick dog brought in by someone. Examination revealed the dog had contracted a previously unknown virus, quickly attacking other animals. Within just an hour, all bitten pets displayed extreme aggression, and the dog's collar eventually led investigators to this apartment. Hearing the dog's name, Angela immediately turns her gaze to Kathy and her daughter, because earlier, during interviews, Brianna mentioned their dog's name, exactly the same. And now Brianna herself is sick, leading everyone to suspect she's infected. Kathy emotionally protests, admitting the dog indeed belongs to them, but insisting her daughter simply has a common cold and isn't infected. But when the inspector requests an examination, Kathy fiercely resists. In the next instant, Brianna suddenly mutates and viciously bites her mother. Shocked, everyone freezes, only watching helplessly as Brianna finishes biting Kathy and runs upstairs. Bleeding heavily from her wound, Kathy stands by the stairway, desperately trying to stop people from pursuing her daughter. Even though Brianna has mutated, Kathy still instinctively wants to protect her child. Considering Kathy is now infected too, they reluctantly handcuff her to the stair railing, and Danny leads a team upstairs to catch Brianna. They cautiously enter Mrs. Espinosa's room. After carefully searching, they finally discover Brianna hiding inside a closet. Seeing her standing quietly and calmly, Danny briefly relaxes his guard. Suddenly, Brianna violently lunges out, gripping Danny tightly and biting him viciously. Realizing he's now inevitably infected, Danny painfully urges the others to quickly escape. But as they rush downstairs, they're horrified to find residents frantically running upstairs. The infected, originally blocked by the metal shutter door, have started crawling through gaps, successfully forcing the door open. Jake tries desperately to stop them, but it's too late. Their only option is to once again escape upward. At the same time, a swarm of infected bursts out and attacks Kathy, who's still handcuffed to the stair railing. The apartment has completely fallen. The remaining survivors frantically flee into a room. Before they can even catch their breath, violent banging sounds erupt from the other side of the door. Even worse, during the escape, the inspector is bitten by an infected and now must be quarantined. But when they turn around, they discover Sadie's finger has been bitten off. Her infection is only a matter of time. Bernard finally breaks down completely. He runs to the window, opens it, and starts screaming for help, begging to be let out. But before he can finish, a bullet pierces through his skull, blood splattering everywhere. Only then do the others fully realize they're never getting out of this apartment alive. Even if they don't get infected, they'll be executed on the spot by snipers. Just as everyone sinks into despair, Yuri suddenly remembers there might be another way. As the landlord of the building, he knows there's a manhole in the basement that connects to the sewer. It might be their only way out. But first, they need the key to the basement, which is inside his room. Before he can finish speaking, the inspector behind him suddenly mutates, smashes through the glass, and grabs Yuri. Angela tries to help but can't, and is forced to slam the door and flee in panic. Now, only Angela, Jake, and Scott remain. Not knowing which floor Yuri's apartment is on, they take a risk and return to the first floor lobby, hoping to find his room number on the mailboxes. Luckily, the infected have cleared out, and the only one left is Kathy, still lying near the railing. They find Yuri's apartment number on the mailbox. It's on the 3rd floor. Just as they're about to leave, the woman on the ground suddenly mutates, blocking the stairway exit. With no other choice, they head for the elevator. Though the building has lost power, the elevator still runs on backup. But when they open the door, they find the rabid dog still inside. Jake doesn't hesitate and kills it instantly. They rush into the elevator only to find Randy inside as well. His body is shredded, soaked in blood, but oddly, he hasn't mutated. Just as the elevator doors are about to close, an infected leaps toward them. Jake reacts quickly and knocks it down. The elevator starts to rise, but suddenly stops on the 2nd floor. Attracted by the sound, another infected charges in. Jake fights fiercely while Angela escapes through the open door. Jake ultimately defeats the infected, and they switch to the stairs. But as they ascend, they find Angela pinned to the ground by another infected. Scott and Jake rush in and attack from both sides, finally killing it. They reach the 3rd floor. Jake kicks open Yuri's door, and Angela runs in, grabbing the basement key from the table. Just when they think escape is near, a mutated Yuri suddenly charges at them. Jake is caught off guard and gets bitten. The loud noise draws more infected from below. Now, escaping through the basement is no longer possible. Scott and Angela have no choice but to run upstairs with everything they've got. They dash all the way to the top floor but find themselves at a dead end. Their only hope is the attic. Angela desperately tries to open the door, finally succeeding just as the infected close in. They quickly hide inside, and once the chaos outside fades, they finally exhale in relief. As they search for an exit, they make a terrifying discovery. Scientific equipment everywhere. research notes filling the room, and cages full of lab rats. It's clear this was a secret biological experiment, and likely the source of the outbreak. Using the faint light from the camera, they keep moving forward. Suddenly, a skylight crashes down from above, making them jump in fear. Scott decides to climb up and check it out, only to witness a horrifying sight. A deformed creature suddenly appears and smashes the camera light. Scott is forced to switch to night vision mode. They now just want to escape, but a blurry figure slowly emerges from one of the rooms. They freeze on the spot, holding their breath. Angela can't see anything, growing more terrified, relying completely on Scott to guide her. Luckily, the creature seems unable to see them and walks past without noticing. The figure is thin, disfigured, likely the deranged scientist responsible for creating the virus. Scott watches the creature's movements while signaling Angela to slowly back away, but in pitch darkness, every step is a risk. And then, the worst happens. Scott accidentally bumps into a table, causing a loud crash. The creature's attention locks onto him, followed by Scott's anguished scream. The camera drops to the floor. Angela, frozen in fear, carefully moves a chair out of the way and crawls over to pick up the camera. When she points it forward, she sees the creature hunched over, feasting on Scott's body. She lets out a quiet gasp. The creature immediately charges at her, launching a frenzied attack. Her fate, as expected, is sealed. The camera, lying motionless on the floor, silently records the final moments of Angela's life.